xóa kỳ muốn thư về muốn chập về bán vì ta mà ngay pi ngay giờ ta đâm từ là đâm môi thông là đâm thông được không để về là đâm đi thôi có đâm thằng về là thôi rồi chập đâm cặp khang cặp rồi cái đạ muồng chung về lo hỏi bàn kỳ lần vài thì đỉnh liệt mỏ đã đậm phải chậm muồng đúng không chậm đạ trùng là vô tụi lụa.
The demand for the long-tailed macaques is huge. Researchers need them for all sorts of experiments. Alzheimer's research, for Ozempic, for vaccines.
Long-tail macaques are super hardy. That's why people like to research on them. You can torture the hell out of them and they stay alive.
When COVID hits, it turns the monkey business upside down because everybody needs monkeys now. And each monkey sells for $50,000. So poaching goes wild.
A wild-caught monkey brings in everything with them. Whatever infectious diseases they have, no scientist worth their salt would ever use a wild-caught monkey.
How would you tell a wild-caught and a captive individual? Well, if you just see a monkey in a cage, you can't.
Wildlife trafficking is almost always driven by greed. Once you're in business involving animals, it's very easy to think of the animals as a commodity rather than a sentient being.
If you think about the 30,000 or more long-tail macaques that are traded each year, you have to ask where are they going? Who's buying these monkeys?
The day that I realized that I wanted to be a special agent for Fish and Wildlife Service, I was in college and walking through the biology building on my way across campus. And I looked to my left and I saw an advertisement posted on the bulletin board for special agent. I never heard of it, didn't know what it was, read about it, and immediately knew that's something I wanted to do. A special agent for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is just like other special agents in the federal government that all of us know about from watching TV or reading books. No different than a special agent for the FBI or the Secret Service.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is one of the oldest law enforcement agencies in the U.S., and people think they just do ducks and fish, but they actually have operations all over the world.
October 21st, seizure of the monkey from the airport.
And what they're trying to do is look at underground smuggling networks, people organizing underground supply chains to smuggle monkeys, to smuggle sharks, to smuggle rhinos. It's something that you can disrupt, but you need to know the information.
Monkey laundering is kind of a catchphrase, but it essentially refers to taking a monkey out of the wild, moving it to a facility, and then doctoring paperwork so it looks like that animal was born in captivity. The reason that a company would do that is it's often illegal to take animals from the wild. Then they were selling those animals to pharmaceutical or research companies in the US and Europe. In 2010, I was just kind of plopped into Bangkok and told to do my best. And one of the first things I heard from an organization out of Cambodia was that they believed that there were macaque farms operating where the farms were capturing wild macaques and then essentially doctoring paperwork to make it look like those animals had been captively bred. It was about a year and a half later that I got a phone call from a special agent, and he told me he was working on an investigation involving the importation of primates. And he wanted to put together an undercover operation to visit an animal research trade fair that was going to occur in Washington, D.C. I posed as a lawyer, basically representing a group of investors who wanted to put their money into primate businesses. Gave me a perfect excuse to go talk to all of the representatives who were there at the trade show from companies that either sell or import primates for research. So I'd start out with innocuous discussion about the trade. And then I might stick something in there like, Hey, what's this I heard about? Somebody over there told me that sometimes a wild one comes in. I said, how do you deal with that? And that's all it took. That's all it took to open up the floodgate of laughter and discussions and yuck stories about wild primates coming in with bullet wounds and injuries that were, indicative of wild, even though they were declared as captive. We tried to set up some type of investigation in Cambodia of these primate facilities. We started it, and it kind of fell apart and never went anywhere. Over the years, when I, as an investigator, thought, how could we go about looking at this issue? I always came back to, we've got to have an undercover person infiltrating somewhere. If we had that opportunity to recruit that person, I would think we would have a high likelihood of success if we could get a person like that to cooperate.
It was in March 2017 that we received an email from somebody who contacted Cruelty Free International. I originally became involved in campaigning and investigating the trade in primates for research back in the 1990s. And at that time, Cruelty Free International carried out several investigations. What we uncovered was absolutely horrific.
This is the fun bit. You know he loves the needles.
The death rates, the mortality rates, the cruelty involved in the trapping of the animals. So this email arrived in my inbox. The email came from a person called Francis Young, who told us that he was working in a company called Vanny Bioresearch, Cambodia. We knew of Vanny. It was the largest macaque facility in Cambodia. Francis said that he'd been working within Vanny for several years and that he basically got to the point where he found it was immoral and it was all wrong and that he wanted to do something about it. So we arranged for him to come over to the UK. We hired a room for the meeting. We held it in a confidential environment away from the office, and there were 3 of us from Cruelty Free International who met with him. Francis was able to provide us with details as to what was happening with the monkeys, and in particular, these monkeys were being transported by road from Cambodia to Bangkok. The monkeys were imprisoned in these small crates, and then they were transferred into another truck at the Thai border, and then they were driven to the airport where they were left for several hours before the flight was ready to depart for the US. I mean, it was fascinating to get that level of insight. This was a unique situation in that we had somebody who was currently working within the largest macaque supply company in Cambodia, who was supplying macaques to the US, the largest importer of macaques in the world. So it was a really significant moment. Suddenly we might be able to follow the chain of supply. Over the next few months, he provided us with video footage with other bits of information. But it was later in the year that he actually started talking to us about what he called the Commune Project. Francis told us that Vanny Bioresearch didn't have enough monkeys to fulfill various orders coming from US importers, and they were looking to supplement captive bred monkeys with monkeys from the wild. Our understanding was that it was to be a farm set up in an area where there was a high density of monkeys and that monkeys were going to be collected. That was when I contacted Fish and Wildlife to let them know what information we'd got and that there was this person who we thought they should meet. And the fact that they took it so seriously was really important.
Operation Longtail Liberation is an undercover effort by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to see if they can't catch the monkey smugglers. They have this whistleblower, but it's in Cambodia where it's dangerous to do undercover ops, and it's not easy to catch people smuggling the monkeys. So it begins this 4-year process where how are they going to document how these monkeys are being smuggled into the U.S.?
I actually don't know the name of it. So Operation
Longtail Liberation.
Longtail Liberation. People think that PETA was behind Operation Longtail Liberation, and we laugh. We wish we had that kind of influence. I'm PETA's Senior Science Advisor for Primate Experimentation. And prior to that, I spent about 30 years in the primate biomedical industry. I was a really good scientist. I was at the top of my game. But I ultimately left because I would not accept the way that they were treating the animals, and I wouldn't accept the fact that the science being done was not good science. PETA approached me in mid-2019, and I took a position with them in September of 2019. We had no awareness of this investigation. In fact, we had no awareness that Vanny and everyone else was involved.
When you look at the monkey business, there is kind of a before and after with COVID. When COVID hits, the Chinese government shuts down their exports of monkeys, and this is the world's biggest supplier of monkeys. So instantly you have a monkey shortage.
Investigators, researchers in the US were like, we need monkeys, get me some monkeys.
Cambodia stepped up. From 5,000 to 6,000 a year, they bumped up to 30,000 monkeys a year. All of a sudden, everybody was getting Cambodian monkeys.
Cambodia starts pumping thousands and thousands of monkeys into the pipeline directly into the US.
I interviewed a lot of monkey breeders, and they all warned me the numbers coming out of Cambodia are impossible. You need this many years, this many females who are pregnant, you lose some babies along the way, and they said, look at the math, it is absolutely impossible.
Got a gun. Definitely got a gun somewhere.
Generally, how this works is they hire local people, usually poor, who can be exploited for very little money, and who know the topography and the habits of animals.
That's an electrocution device.
They hire those people to go out and capture the wild primates, and then bring them to their facilities.
How about just 20 here? 20.
So in November 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice unveils this indictment which outlines a massive monkey smuggling scheme. And the indictment accuses officials from Vanny of being the architects of this process that smuggles thousands of monkeys from Southeast Asia into the U.S. And this indictment is extremely detailed. There's over 500,000 pieces of evidence as they show internal company emails, shipping records, videos.
Very strong.
The monkey business in the US is multi-billion dollars a year, and the people buying them are companies like Charles River Labs, which is based in Boston, huge company, $12 billion market cap. Or you have Worldwide Primates, company down in Florida, decades of experience. Inotive, another company that is a monkey buyer and seller. It's a huge business, but it's a small club. There's only 4 or 5 big players in this. And it's thought that Worldwide Primates and Inotive were extremely involved in this Cambodian shipments. And they've both shut down their shipments, and they've been able to resource to other parts of the world. But it's pretty clear that when the monkey boom was in its height from Cambodia, these were the 2 companies that were benefiting.
So the indictment was actually posted November 16th. You know, that's when the news release went out from Fish and Wildlife. The individuals listed on the indictment were all foreign nationals, and so there was no way that U.S. officials could arrest them until they're actually on U.S. soil.
It's approximately 10:19 a.m. This is Special Agent Commander Vitorno, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We are in JFK Airport. We're going to be speaking with Mr. Masfal Krai.
Masfal Krai, the Cambodian Assistant Director in the Forestry Department, was picked up by Fish and Wildlife as he transited through JFK.
So the reason that you were brought back here is because the United States has a warrant for your arrest for trafficking in wildlife, in particular primates.
He denied having anything to do with smuggling wild-caught long-tailed macaques.
Have you ever directed any of your staff to deliver monkeys to Vanny?
No, what did I say?
I never directed.
You were delivering wild monkeys to the farms, and we know that.
No.
Yes.
I'm not going to entertain you continuing to lie.
I never thought this would actually go to trial. There's too much at stake here. There are too many vested interests. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But it did go to trial.
In March 2024, a trial starts. And of the 8 original people who are indicted, 6 of whom are from Vanny and 2 are from the Cambodian government, there's only 1 person on trial. Masfal Krai. What they're trying to prove is that this Cambodian government official knew about the conspiracy to smuggle monkeys in. But unfortunately, none of the executives from Vanny were caught, none of them were arrested, so they're trying to build an entire case against this one government official.
The first big revelation from the Fish and Wildlife Service in the trial was that 30,000 wild-caught monkeys entered the U.S. during this 5-year period. This was the first time that we were finally going to see action being taken. Our director of primate experimentation was sitting in the courtroom. I had another staff member sitting in the courtroom. And, you know, at every break, they'd call, I'd get updates. The prosecution called several witnesses. The informant, Francis Young, multiple Fish and Wildlife agents, and they also called an expert on long-tail macaques.
So I first hung out with long-tail macaques 30-something years ago in Indonesia. And I sat in the midst of a group, about 40 of them, and I sat there almost 3 days. And that first interaction really struck me because they had these incredibly complex, amazing social lives, sort of moving around, hanging out together. I was approached by the Fish and Wildlife, by their legal team, and asked if I would be an expert witness at the trial. They wanted me to talk about the range, distribution, the endangered status, just about monkeys in general. And also they wanted me to talk a little bit about what does it mean to get wild and captive monkeys if you get them mixed up. So this chart was this annual birth and growth rate at a particular set of breeding facilities in Cambodia, this Vanny Bio column here. They showed it to me and they asked me, okay, here's how many monkeys they had. Here's how many monkeys they were sending out each year. And here's what the population looked like from year to year. And I looked at that and I was like, something's wrong here. They were getting rid, that's exporting, more monkeys than could have possibly been born within that group. So if you're exporting more monkeys than could have been born that year in your group, where are those monkeys coming from? Either other facilities or the wild. So the most interesting thing to me was not the prosecution, who I sort of knew what they were going to ask, right? That's fine, that's easy. The defense, on the other hand, spent most of their time trying to paint me as a radical conservationist, unable to do good science because I'm such a crazy monkey-hugging person.
Is that true?
No, I would not hug a monkey. Their hands and feet are covered with feces and urine. And the last thing you want to do is have them on you.
The U.S. Department of Justice gathered tons of evidence. They show us some emails. They show us videos.
How many this time? 24. 24, okay.
They show us documents from inside the company. But as the trial proceeds, almost all the charges are dropped, and we're down to just 2 charges, one for conspiracy and one for smuggling.
Because the big one, they also scare. Some of them, they even protect the small ones.
So Francis Young took lots of videos. We only saw a handful of them. And Mosfile Cree was caught on video saying, hey, why don't you build a different road? It'll make the smuggling easier.
Why don't you make another road? If you make another road, it means more safe for your smuggling.
But I think the most compelling piece of evidence in this was the fact that the Fish and Wildlife was able to establish this chain of a wild monkey all the way from Cambodia to the US by having their informant mark the crate that contained the wild monkey. And when that monkey landed in JFK, Fish and Wildlife agents were then able to identify it as the marked crate containing the wild monkey, even though the paperwork said this was a captive monkey. The defense said, show me a document that has Mosfile Cree's name on it that also is connected to wild monkeys. Everyone did their closing arguments. The jury went off. They came back. They had some questions. There was an interesting question that was asked, and that question was, if your boss tells you to do something and you do it and it's illegal, are you responsible? And I think this was our first inkling that this might not go the way we thought it was going to go.
They have to prove that he was involved, and they fail. There's no way in which the US government can prove that he acted outside his capacity as a government official trying to regulate monkey trade.
And then the verdict came back. Cree was found not guilty.
I fully expected them to get a conviction, and I was very surprised when the case resulted in an acquittal. I know from being an agent for 20 years that things don't always go your way, and you can't predict how witnesses are going to come across on the stand or how a jury is going to evaluate the evidence you present.
I was surprised. I was like, the data are there. It's very clear that, in fact, this company was lying. There is no way they were getting all these monkeys that they were exporting from a captive facility. They were taking them from the wild.
After the trial, Cree goes back to Cambodia and he receives a hero's welcome.
Fish and Wildlife certainly got some significant criticism for not getting this conviction. There was a lot of talk about the amount of money that was given to Francis Young, the informant, concerns about whether that was mismanaged.
Poor leadership at the Fish and Wildlife Service, a lack of establishment guidance for investigations, and influence from radical nonprofits led to the deeply flawed Operation Longtail liberation. The investigation ended in embarrassment.
Despite the fact that the defendant was found not guilty or acquitted, I think this case sent a huge message to the monkey business because they had been getting away with all sorts of dubious practices. It was an open secret in the monkey business that illegal monkeys were coming from Cambodia. The case shined a spotlight on this rather dark world, and despite the fact that nobody went to jail, it's not going to be as easy to smuggle monkeys.
It wasn't really, for me, about that individual defendant. It was about a system, right, of monkey laundering, of taking monkeys from the wild and getting them to the U.S.
While Cree's hands might have been on the tap, it is the U.S.'s demand for these monkeys that is draining the forests.
For me, the real places to ask questions are the people with the money, the folks here in the United States who are buying the monkeys. They should be much more ethically and scientifically aware than they are. And they are some of the main ones involved in bringing monkeys in from around the world here to the United States.
I don't think this is over. There are 7 more indicted individuals who the U.S. is waiting to bring to trial. And what this trial really did was show that this is happening. Wild monkeys are being injected into the U.S. biomedical industry. And that has huge consequences. And prior to this case, no one ever spoke about that.